Now open. It's February 27th, 2018. If we could all stand and pledge allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. On tonight's agenda, first the board will review the minutes of February 6th, previous meeting minutes. In addition, we will have budget discussions both with DPW Director and the Fire Chief. We also have a request from Blackstone Valley Vocational Technical School for one-day liquor license, which is the annual superintendent's dinner. We have a request, the board will consider a request from the Men's Club, as last year the board sponsored and assisted the Men's Club in the cost and safety and facilities management of the fireworks. We have a request from Mendon Upton Regional Teachers Association for a 5K road race. The board will be also discussing and making motion for a public surplus to approve that and of inventory from the town. The board will be also reviewing a sign request for the Recreation Commission identifying Kiwanis Beach upper parking lot. We'll consider an applicant for appointment to the Council on Aging. And let's see, the Planning Board and Code Enforcement, we have a street name request and is asking for the board's approval for Upton Ridge Senior Housing. And we also have a review of the Code Enforcement permitting fee schedule, which the board will review. New business, whatever may be anticipated, could be brought up, and the board will conclude our meeting by going in an executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Exception Number 3, to discuss strategy sessions with respect to collective bargaining if the chair declares an open meeting will have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position. At the conclusion of an executive session, the board will reconvene only for purposes of adjournment. There will be no other meeting, no other activity by the board after that. So I would first ask, gentlemen, we have minutes for February 6th, both regular and executive. Gary?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the regular and executive session minutes from February 6th as written.
Second the motion.
That's unanimous action of the board. Okay, we're going to go into the budget. Would you please come up, Dennis? We're first going to discuss the DPW water sewer facility, waste management, excuse me. So at this time, I'll turn it over to you. The board has previously been provided with all the documentation relative to the budget process.
Good evening. I know you have a busy agenda, Mr. Chairman, so I'll go through the budget as I did with the last presentation I did. I've taken the liberty of highlighting in yellow any changes, and I'll stop me at any time you'd like to ask questions. So I'm starting with the water budget. On page 1, you have the overview of the entire water budget. The water budget is recommended for a decrease this year of 2.29%. It's a level funded budget for all intents and purposes, and the reason for the decrease is the capital outlay is down $35,000 from last year. And although there are some line items you'll see as we go through our discussion later on, the decrease in the outlay outweighs the increase in some of the line items. So the overall budget has a decrease of 2.29%. This budget consists of wages, expenses, capital outlay, debt, and a line item for extra unforeseen. The capital request is a $200,000 request. It represents approximately half of the $400,000 amount recommended by Tater and Howard in the town's capital improvement program. This is for removing asbestos-containing pipe throughout the town and our water infrastructure. As we go on to the wages account, your increases are a 1.63% recommendation that includes contractual negotiated labor rate changes and inclusive of a 0.5% for non-union. I remind the board that we are still in our contract, our final contract year for the union, and we haven't begun our union negotiations, so there is no accommodation for future increases for union in this budget.
Basically, where we have the percentages along the line, this is where the lines have been transferred to apply the dollars to the respective category they're applied to, such as the wage differential at Public Works Director at 30 for this, So it would come out to 100% throughout the whole budget, but it's just broken out as we've done, which is for better financial management, but just so we're all clear. Okay.
The next line item is the general expense line item. It's the bulk of the water enterprise account, and it has a proposed 1.27% increase. This increase accommodates, if you look at the very bottom, highlighted in yellow, there is a projected 10% health insurance increase of $6,080.40, and a projected 36% increase in pension contributions. Medicare taxes has been removed. Last year, you could see it was funded as $4,122, but that line is actually, that amount is actually funded in our local side of the ledger. It shouldn't be in the enterprise, so it was removed.
Okay, health insurance, it's my understanding that it's not 10%. Yeah, it's 10% here.
The budgeted amount, so when we initially had budgeted, we had used budget numbers that we thought were from last year, and they were actually lower than the actuals. And when we met with Maya, they had given us a document that represented the true actual cost for our health insurance. So that being said, when we arrived at the new health insurance number of 0% increase, we would have had to budget an additional, say, 5%. So this number actually represents, it could be lowered by 5%, but certainly couldn't be lowered at 0%.
Okay.
Based upon the original actual health insurance costs that we actually had to pay this past year.
Okay. So we're basically applying this per individual, and that's why the numbers are
Right,
going
I mean,
up.
we could, again, we could lower that by a small percentage, but not
Mhm.
the true 0% that is
Okay,
is projected.
okay, thank you.
The next line item is capital outlay.
Excuse me, just a second, Dennis, the 4,122 in there,
Yes, sir.
you said that that is funded, where else do we see that in the budget?
Funded on the local side, on the general side of government. So it's accounted for in the general ledger, not in the enterprise account.
Right.
Do we have it in the enterprise account to reimburse the general fund? Is that what we were doing? Because I know we were doing that with OPEB, I thought.
We have, the payroll taxes are already accounted for under the town manager's budget, all payroll taxes for all employees. After talking to our accountant, he had recommended that we remove this line item from this budget. Certainly, we could reconsider adding that and then reimbursing the general ledger. It's something to consider.
The money is the money, it's just where we apply it, I guess.
Exactly. The number's gonna be the same, it depends where you wanna pull it from.
Right. I suppose for accuracy reasons, it would probably be better that it does come out of this account.
Okay, and so we could add that in there, Dennis, and then we could do two things. We could move the number down in the Board of Selectmen budget, or we can keep it in there, and then it'll hit our free cash at the end of the year at $4,000.
Right.
So either way, we're still gonna have the money, depends where you wanna apply it.
The accountant could also take it out at the end of the year for, I mean, I know these are the preliminary budgets that we're in right now, but
Mhm.
if the accountant so chooses, he could leave this as a zero, fully funded on the general ledger, and then take it out as an indirect cost at the end of the year,
Okay.
and it would still balance.
He could take it out, right, we'd have to account for it though now.
Got it.
I guess the point was, leaving it in here and on the general ledger is double dipping.
Okay, if you reduce the general ledger by that same amount, you're now balanced. And basically, the enterprise is paying for itself, including the Medicare PR tax. Okay,
The next line item is the capital outlay, and this year's request for capital outlay represents half of the $400,000 recommended by Tater and Howard on the town's capital improvement program for the removal of asbestos-containing pipe. This project will coincide with the town's pavement management program to ensure efficiency and eliminate duplications in efforts. In other words, the $200,000 that I'm recommending be utilized to remove asbestos-containing pipe would be in conjunction with our road management program, so that I would be taken into consideration if we're tearing up a road to rip a pipe out. We're gonna take a look at all the utilities that are in that ground. When that road goes back, that road is not to be touched again for at least a moratorium.
mhm. Could
This
I
is, I'm sorry.
how many miles of asbestos pipe, or do you have an idea how much is still in the ground? Because we've come a long way.
Yes,
At one point,
off
the whole
top.
town was.
You know, I asked that question months ago, and I don't recall what the exact amount was.
Okay.
But
All
yeah,
right.
we are actively removing it.
Good.
The
Yep.
goal is to get it all out.
Just, yeah.
Does
Okay.
that look like it might be 5 years, 10 years? How far down the road do you think that would
I'd
be?
like to have it all out in 3, if possible.
About 3.
Really don't want to go past, well, if we have to go 5, depends on the money, depends on other projects that come up, what else is going on in town. We have to take all that into consideration, so that we don't have a fluctuation in our rate or a spike in our rate.
Mhm.
This is capital, so this is gonna go on the surcharge.
It's only been there for 60 years. You know, whatever. Okay.
So that represents a $35,000 increase over last year's recommendation of a $235,000 capital outlay. And then the last chart on page 4 represents the revenue budget. This is a projection of fiscal year 18's anticipated revenues for the year based on our 2 commitments that we've put out in September and December. And then we forecast all the way out to the end of the fiscal year. We back out about 10% for uncollectibles, and we try to stay conservative in that number because that's what the DOR prefers that we do. So if you look at user charges, we're projecting that we'll take in $583,646 this year, and fiscal year 19 requires $591,370. And this is going to equate to a 1.32% rate increase that the Department of Public Works will recommend to this board at your March meeting, which is a small increase. Water connection fees, we've already taken in $32,624. I'm projecting out $20,000 because I'm staying conservative. If you look at the last 5 years trend, it goes up and down, but I don't really see anything that's lower than $20,000. It was 1 year, I think there was $16,000. But for the most part, I think $20,000 is a safe number. The water surcharge is derived from 100% of capital and 50% of debt, because 50% of our debt goes on the water surcharge and 50% goes on the tax levy. And then at the very bottom, the last line is the tax levy. $167,348 is what will go on the tax levy. That's the general side of the ledger's share of basically supporting the enterprise account. And that is the water budget, proposed water budget for fiscal year 19.
The only thing I'd ask is on the connection piece, if we can get a measure, probably from the planning board, what the likely hookup dates will be for some of these projects. I don't know if any of them will hit 19, I don't know, but that would have a
Some will.
significant impact.
Hmm.
Not that you want to I like conservative, believe me.
Right.
I don't like to forecast something that doesn't happen, but just in the event that that number's skewed way off.
Especially in an enterprise, we try to say, not unreasonably conservative, but enough that we don't get in trouble
Mhm.
and have to go and take money out of retained earnings to bail ourselves out.
Okay, thank you.
The next budget is the wastewater budget. It's formatted exactly the same as the water budget. I've highlighted in yellow all of the changes. Most of the budget is a level funded budget. Fiscal year 2019 recommends an overall increase of 21.65%. This is a large increase, but it is primarily due to capital, not so much the operating budget. The operating budget itself is actually only a small increase, 1.16 for contractual obligations, inclusive of a 0.5% for non-union, and 1.52% increase for general expenses. It's the 220.73 increase for capital outlay that makes that 21.65% increase in the overall budget.
Could you be specific as to what capital outlay would be specific to an instance of where it would be expended?
Yes, sir. If we jump to page 4, fiscal year 19 capital outlay is for $60,000 for the design and replacement repair of a 12-inch sewer main along Centerbrook, as identified by, all of this is identified by Tater and Howard in our capital improvement. Some of this has been deferred and is late and should have been done already. Some of this is programmed to be done right now. An additional $60,000 for replacement of the pumps at the sewer headworks plant. $10,000 for replacing one of the pumps at the Joshua Drive pump station, the last one. we actually replaced one of them last year. It failed on us right in the middle of the year, and this one is right behind it. Then there is a $20,000 for replacing the grinder pump, otherwise known as the Muffin Monster, at Station Street Pump Station. And $113,000 will complete our Mass DEP required comprehensive wastewater collection system infiltration and inflow field program project. As you know, we've been working on that for the last year or so. This is mandated by the Mass DEP. It's going to be crucial to how that plant operates, especially where you have extensions going on the sewer, water and sewer over years. What happens right now with inflow and infiltration is if we have heavy rains, especially where that 12-inch sewer main is along Centerbrook, during heavy rains and a high water table, that water is actually getting into our treatment plant, and it's overwhelming our treatment plant. And it can cause illegal discharges and DEP fines. And that represents $263,000 in proposed capital improvements for the wastewater.
Could I ask a question that sounds naive? We're putting this into an operational budget, and these are capital outlays. Would these be subjective to town meeting vote in any capacity? Where we're expending capital, in some cases sizable, $60,000?
Yeah, we would have to go
So,
for the approval of these.
but
dollars.
it's being lined in an operational budget. I understand what you're doing. You're putting it into your enterprise budget.
Right, but it's actually under the capital part of the budget, so I think when we construct our, if I look at the Finance Committee report, I think there's a section that is an article specific for our capital, and our debt's in there, the tax levy's in there.
So you're gonna, sorry to do this, but you're gonna roll this all into one number, is basically what you're saying, as a line item vote at the town meeting.
Right, I see.
Versus going to the other approach, which would be to itemize the capital outlay. So,
So you are suggesting have a separate article? for each
no,
one of the
I'm not.
capital?
I'm just asking the question, is it preferable to do it this way? I don't have a problem. I believe where it's enterprise, it's gonna operate within itself, it's capital outlay, it's gonna, but traditionally, it's a change from the way it's
And I think in
done.
years past, excuse me, sorry to interrupt you, but in years past, I think where we voted on the revolving funds, that gave an opportunity to report those expenses on the revolving fund. So in that particular article, I think they originally were all separate articles, but then we started voting on revolving funds as a group, and I think that's where those expenses would have normally been shown.
Well, last year, if you look, so I'm looking at last year's FinCom report, under Article 6, which is the water enterprise article, wages and salaries was one item listed, expenses was another item, capital outlay was a third item, debt and extra unforeseen was also listed. So they're listed separately in the article itself. I
So,
think what you're.
But my point is, it's an article, and this is an operational budget. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, you're presenting your budget, but your budget, this is really an article.
That's
For the
right.
town meeting, that's a budget. It's, maybe I wasn't clear, this is not an operational budget, this is your intended needs, which would be an article, all packaged as one article at a town meeting. So I just want to differentiate, so people don't get confused that you're asking for $258,000 operational cost. You're really asking for a capital outlay, which is an article. Maybe we're saying the same thing. I'm just looking for clarity.
Well, I guess, maybe you wanna jump in the history here.
If I may, since we've had the enterprise funds, we've always voted water and wastewater has a separate article for the funding mechanism, and capital has always been in there.
That's my point,
Right,
right?
so even though he's presenting it as the operation budget for wastewater and water, I guess the public should be aware, it's not gonna be in Article 3, it's gonna be Article 4 and 5. as we
Basically,
typically do in the past.
thank you. Clean way of saying, it's not Article 3, it's 4, but it's not part of your operational budget. The capital outlay will go into the article for the enterprise. That's all I'm saying. Because you're laying this out, and I understand what you're doing, you're laying this out to the observer, they're gonna say, well, now it's a line item within this operational
Right,
budget.
I understand.
And we don't get to see it. Well, you will see it, it will be an article. That's the only difference.
Good point.
That's all. I know I stirred the water on that one, didn't I? Okay.
Well, I was just thinking, because there's no water or wastewater in Article 3, so,
Right, since,
so none of that's in there anyways.
My point.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. I just wanted clarity. We
Understood.
don't want to find out down the road, whoops.
I
Okay.
think because Dennis is presenting both an
Operational
operations
budget.
budget, it's not in Article 3.
Correct.
I think is what
Yep.
Chairman Fleming is trying to say.
Exactly right. Okay. I'll ask another one, it'll be even more confusing. Go ahead.
I forgot where I left off.
You know, you were right there on the capital outlay.
I guess one quick question I did have, not separate topic altogether. The $113,000 to complete the MADEP comprehensive wastewater collection system, how far along in that project are we, if that's the final phase of it?
So, we're actually not that far along.
Oh.
And I think that it was, looking at what happened last year, we took a small little bite of it. And this year, when I took a look at, my conversations with our water and wastewater supervisor and the DEP, I know that Mass DEP is aware that we're working on this. I know that Mass DEP is expecting communities to put together realistic plans based on finances to be able to do I&Is. It's not just here, it's everywhere. But considering the impact that it's having on the plant, I stepped it up. And 130, I could have stretched it out over another couple years, but if you have some major problems at that plant, even though the DEP is aware that we're working on it, I don't know that they're going to turn a blind eye just because of that. I mean, we've been working on it for a couple of years now. 113,000 will finish our I&I investigation, and it will identify all of our issues. From there, we're going to have to formulate a game plan to put finances together to fix those issues and come back to town meeting for more funding. But at least at least at this point, we will have identified them all, and we know where all our smoking guns are.
The last time we did it, I think the cost savings offset the expense because of the waste that was,
Right.
you know, being lost. I mean, we were outsourcing water everywhere instead of going where it should have, so, yeah.
Well, I can tell you the last couple of large rain events we had here, we had staff coming in on the weekend to try to handle that plant, because that plant was having a tough time with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This 60,000, that covers enough for the replacement of that 12-inch main too?
Yes, that's based on the Tater and Howard recommendation, which is not a very old recommendation.
It doesn't seem like a lot. I remember last time they presented something, it was like over 100,000 for just a
Right.
couple hundred feet of pipe.
It depends on the type of pipe, where it is, how much work is involved. I didn't scrutinize their quote in fine detail. They're a reputable company. I
Mhm.
tend to stand it's a strong quote. And nothing else in the budget is changed with the exception of capital outlay was the last thing we discussed. So again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the last chart shows you the revenue budget part of it, where we take a look at where we are in fiscal year 18. We project out to the end of the fiscal year, and then we take a look at our needs for fiscal year 19 to see where we're going to be for recommended changes. For the user charges, we're looking at a request of 3.68% rate increase for the next fiscal year. So that is going to be what you can expect to see me come before this board when I request a rate increase for sewer. I'm also requesting $180,000 from retained earnings, $150,000 to be utilized towards the capital outlay to knock down some of those projects, and $30,000 to go into the extra unforeseen emergency reserve account, which I think is a very prudent account to have.
Okay, gentlemen?
How do you plan on funding the 4 log system? Would that be an article, or is that gonna be in the capital?
So I'm glad you brought that up. It's a good point. So the actual work itself doesn't look like it's going to be very costly. It's going to be the purchase of some pipe, about 300 feet of 12-inch pipe. We're going to be utilizing the feeds that we have there for chlorination. We're simply going to make it so that it chlorinates at the well or right there at the head to give it contact time before it gets to the pump station itself. Of course, we're going to need the nod from DEP. Most of the cost is going to come from the design and the permitting of it. And I have a cost estimate from CDM right now as we stand of $31,900 for that part of it, of all the permitting and going back and forth with DEP, the final design of it. I'll bet and don't hold me to it, please, but I'll bet you the actual cost of materials is probably under $10,000. And we can do the work in-house. It won't require hiring anyone. A contractor to help us with the excavation, I'm sorry. But we'll do the piping ourselves. So, your question, sir, I'm sorry. Where would I find the money would be that extra unforeseen reserve.
Oh,
I
that's-
probably would have to, depending on what the budget looks like, I probably will have to go in front of the finance committee and ask for a transfer within the enterprise account, which is why I said it's very good that that money's there.
Yeah, almost there.
Just one other quick question. I'm looking at the revenue side again, and I see the increase in the revenue side. Approximately right now, how many users do we have on the system?
For water, 1,450, and for sewer, oh, I had that number. It's only a few hundred, 400. It's low, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Steve, I don't remember that number.
I think it's about
exactly.
a 30 to third ratio to
Yeah,
your water.
it is
Yeah.
considerably low.
because the cost of sewer, wastewater pipe system's so expensive, yeah.
Do we have a dollar projection, how much that rate would be, that percentage would be, that 3.68?
No, I don't. But I will provide that for our discussions when we talk about the rate. So you can take a look at what the average homeowner can expect to see in an increase in their bill. 3.68 is not a large rate increase.
Okay,
Very good.
thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you,
Thank you
Doug.
for highlighting it, make it easier. Much. Chief, come on up. We have the fire EMS budget for us. And as we do, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening.
How's everyone this night?
Good,
Good.
so-
Not too bad.
Budget time again?
Never stops.
I have a supplement for you if I can approach.
Thank you.
Documentation as to who receives what in the wage line, to make it easier for members to understand. Okay, sorry about that. If I may proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Yep, please.
I'll start off by saying that this is one of the most conservative budgets that I've presented since I've been here. It may also be one of the more complex budgets, having said that, because we've proposed combining some of the lines further in both fire and EMS. We combined fire and EMS together back in September of 2010, and since that time, we have consolidated some of the accounts that we've been allowed to, but we're making a presentation this year to try to further that effort to make our daily processes and our weekly processes a little bit easier. We found it cumbersome at times to be able to deal with, especially at the end of a fiscal year, with wages, for example, when so many of our incidents in our services are both fire and EMS. So I'll try to explain that as best I can as we go along, but if you have any questions, certainly I welcome those questions. Starting off, I'd say that from a wage perspective, we've proposed a 0.5% increase for all non-contractual wages at this point. We've also made some changes from a step and grade perspective. We have a position that became vacated this year, and the person that fills that position will start at step 1 instead of being at step 2. So we've gone back in one case, and in another case, we've moved a position forward. So there's step and grade changes. And I would point out that there's a longevity change in addition for one employee this year who we added to the list of longevity within the contract for longevity bonuses. And we are in the process right now of negotiating the new contract with the firefighters union. So any increases or changes per that contract are unknown at this time. From an expense line increase, those increases are limited to vehicle maintenance from both fire. Can I help you? What's that?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm on page 2, in case that. if that
I was just trying to look at it at the same time as you speak.
$5,000 is being proposed for fire and $1,000 for EMS. And those are the two changes in the budgets from an expense standpoint. Everything else is gonna remain the same, but I will run through that. The reason for fire is that consistently in the past several years, we've added to that vehicle maintenance line based on our experiences that we're having. We continue to find ourselves at the end of the first 6 months. We try to do all of our preventative maintenance in the summertime and into the fall. And by December, January, we're left with a few $1,000s in vehicle maintenance, which doesn't really give us a whole lot for an unforeseen event for the last 6 months of the year. Last year, we back up a second. From a standpoint of apparatus, our tower is probably the most expensive vehicle that we maintain from a preventative standpoint, just based on the amount of equipment that's on it, the aerial annual testing that's involved with that. Last year, we saw a good year with that truck. It was below average. This year has been above average. We got a
So
computer issue with that.
basically, your 5,000 for fire and 1,000 for EMS, that doesn't seem like a substantial amount. Where you cite down here that it's traditionally towns expend more than that, so is that sufficient? I mean, the obvious is you want the equipment to be maintained and properly in running functional order, I should say. Is that sufficient funding to do that?
I think the fair answer to that question is we'll likely be back as.
I think we should prepare for what will be. Let's not go conservative to the point that we're not realistic. It's like for years, we used to project snow removal with $10,000 and it'd be $200,000 over a year. I mean, we need to, Derek, I would say if this is insufficient, do we want to get to a point, to your point, in the fiscal year, we're into February or January and we have a $3,000 expenditure and there are no funds? This needs to be looked at.
We had, for example, this
He's
year.
actually budgeting 40,000 for that.
That's an additional 5,000, so
Additional
Additional 5,000.
additional 5,000 to the 35 that we have.
Total of
But-
40.
This year, a total of 40.
I just
So-
ask, is it enough? That's
You know,
all.
I think, in all fairness, what we've done is come back each year when we've added to our list testing that needs to be provided, for example, hose testing, ladder testing, aerial testing. We've now added flow testing of our SCBA, because we have
Well,
brand new
Why
SCBA, and when we do
don't you,
that.
why don't you address it with Derek and we'll see if it's adequate, that's all.
Okay.
Because your site below.
Yep.
Seems like there's not, if it's not needed, hey, I don't wanna spend it, but all I say is.
I was thinking I think the only thing that eases the maintenance budget was the ability to get rid of the District 7 truck.
That's one
And
thing.
so I think that was
yep.
something that should help to offset maintenance. You know, I was kind of hoping that would be level funded, that particular line item. I could see the ambulance side. I know we're gonna try to get more time, so I can see spending on the ambulance, but I was kind of thinking on the fire side, especially with the district truck gone, that would actually free up some extra money to spend on, rescue.
I think it does, but I would point out from a vehicle standpoint that we don't have a vehicle that's under warranty of any way, shape, or form anymore. Our vehicles are older, they're in good shape, but as you know, that also means that we have more maintenance to do. When we bought our tower 3.5 years ago, we knew going into that a new tower would have been over $1 million. We spent a third of that, but knowing that we did that, we also have to keep in mind that our maintenance budget will likely be a little bit higher. We've had good success with that truck. We had a year this year, we had to replace a computer, which was a $6,000 expense, plus labor. So, you know, those things are gonna happen, but that could happen with a 3-year-old truck too. So, but I would say that from the standpoint of our fleet, we do not have a vehicle under warranty anymore. So we're paying for whatever happens.
Well, again, we go back to the fact, go ahead, Derek.
Would the board appreciate if the chief and I look at our vehicle maintenance line item, which is proposed at 44,000,
Yep.
and give you a detailed breakdown of how we arrive at that number?
I think it should be broke down. It should say
Yeah.
pump testing, ladder testing, aerial testing.
We're actually in process of doing that right now.
So let's
We have
consider that
We'll
done.
have a 3-year report for you to look at within the week. We're close to completing that right now because we're curious to know exactly where those expenses are going, so we can look at it from year to year and see what things are costing. And that will include a lot of that testing, which will be assigned each individual truck. So we'll
So
have a
that-
report for you in the coming week.
That satisfies the question, is then we have a comfortable factor knowing what the expenditure requirement is. I defer to him because he knows more
I
about
don't know
this.
if some of that stuff really falls underneath the vehicle maintenance, though.
Oh, okay, we'll find out.
Say it again?
I'm not sure if some of that stuff should fall under vehicle maintenance.
Ladders and, it's all on vehicles, the stuff that we pay for.
It's
So-
not part of the vehicle itself, it's,
But the only other option then would be to put it in general, in like a general expense line, and we'd have to, we're either gonna pay it out of general expense or we're gonna pay it out of vehicle maintenance.
So this way we'll get an itemized list, the board will have a chance to look at it. Somebody like me that doesn't know what goes into maintenance will have at least a conceptual idea of what that costs.
So we'll work on that. We'll give you, we won't even title it or anything.
Yeah.
If the board members decide to move it around and put it under a different line item, we're more than
Sure.
happy to do that. I think what we want to do on our end is make sure that there's a level of comfort that because we are combining the fire side and the EMS side, that there's still enough detail in the line items that everyone feels comfortable that this is how we arrived at these numbers.
I mean, if you look at the ambulance, you break out stretcher maintenance, you break out that. Technically, what you just said, it should be in the vehicle maintenance. By what you
I
just
agree,
worded
but also keep in mind that a lot of the language that's in the EMS budget carries over from 7 years ago. The ambulance service supplies budget is a very liberal budget compared to what we have on the fire side. There's a lot that's heaped into that account that carried over from 7 years ago that's been allowed to be maintained there. If you look at fire wages, for example, we outline each stipended position from a fire perspective down to 21 positions. But we also have stipends for EMTs that don't appear that way because they never were tracked that way.
Yeah, I know, I did talk to Derek about that earlier.
There-
Because
there
we don't
is-
even know how many per diem positions you have or anything either.
They're not,
And all
they're
that
not,
should be.
they're not covered on here individually. Those people are paid out of the wage budget that you see there for EMS. So, they don't have an assigned stipend, any of the per diems, so they're not showing up here, by name.
Okay.
And I would just point out too that the $1,000 increase for EMS is the result of an ambulance, OEMS request for an additional PM on both of our ambulances on an annual basis.
Well, we're gonna get a list now, so.
Yep, that accounts for 5, so we have to do 3 PMs a year instead of 2 that we were doing before, so that's $500 a truck. To change oil and filters, grease the truck. And that's the reason for the $1,000 request for EMS.
And I think we kind of hit on, a little bit on this a couple of meetings ago. We were talking about the way the budget is presented, and this year will be confusing for the residents. But I think it's important on pages 4, 5, and 6, when we break out the budget, that's where I think it would be helpful to spell out the EMTs, even though it may have never been shown that way before. But when we go into the fire lieutenants, firefighters, and all that that's shown further into our budget, that may be a good opportunity to plug in that information. At least the people could see.
Similar to the page that you see there?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Where, again, this isn't gonna show up in our, the line items of what we vote on our budget, but it will be expanded upon in the backside of the budget, the later pages of the budget.
That's right.
I think would be helpful.
Yep, we can do that.
Okay. I facilitate. Next,
Moving forward to page 4, I will start with the sheet that I provided with the names of the individuals on. That's 5100, 5100. So going down that list, fire chief, myself, 0.5% increase, the assistant chief, 0.5% increase, EMT financial assistant, 0.5%. Our stipended positions do not get COLA increases since they were established. There's no other increases on page 4. On page 5, about halfway down the page, hourly compensation line. If you notice, the fire hourly compensation at $59,495 and the EMS compensation at $54,445 have now been combined for FY19 to total $114,510. The COLA's been added to that, 0.5% increase.
So question, Mike, for the assistant fire chief, does he get paid an hourly rate too when he goes on
Hourly
call?
rate, yep. Yep, so
Why
most
did
of-
he get a 0.5 and the rest of the positions didn't get a 0.5?
the rest of the positions fall under the hourly compensation line.
Mhm.
He gets, his position shows just like,
So he just gets that 12.5 and that's it?
that's what he gets.
Okay, he doesn't get the hourly rate. If he goes on a call, he doesn't get extra?
He gets an hourly wage too. Yep.
So is the 12.5 considered a stipend, or is that 12.5?
That's a stipended position, but the assistant chief, for whatever reason, has received the COLA in that position, but, you know.
I think in the past, we
All
haven't
the kinds of-
adjusted that for COLA. Okay.
So I'll make that adjustment. I made that personal adjustment, not knowing that we can move that number back down to the original
Okay.
number.
We'll get it on the wage side, but not the stipend side.
Right, so that, if the 12,515 is a stipend number, then he'll get it on the hourly compensation side.
Hourly side, okay.
Got that. EMT and paramedic training. That's a 0.5% increase. About halfway down the page. The increase for firefighter Earl, he's going from step 2 to step 3 this year. That's the 1195 increase that you see. We have plugged firefighter paramedic Montequin into the step 1 position that was vacated by firefighter Bob Johnson. So there's a $457 increase, or 0.76%. We have proposed for fire inspector credentialing with the addition of 2 new employees that we add $671. That's an incentive that's currently in the contract. And as I mentioned earlier, 1 additional employee will receive a longevity bonus this year. That's $450. Totals a 0.3% increase overall in wages. Any question on wages?
Does the, your career overtime cover enough for the guys when they go to the academy?
It has in the past. There's 2 different accounts there for overtime. One's holidays. Again, we calculate that a little differently. There's 11 holidays that are calculated, plus the overtime line at 25,000. Those 2 lines combined are overtime. So, depending on what happens and who we have from a staff perspective, we're likely to move positions to try to cover that vacancy while he's gone for 10 weeks, and limit the overtime as much as possible. He has a date currently of July 18th, to go to the academy, which it's gonna affect us a little bit in the summertime when we have more vacation being used than other times. But that's the earliest, most reasonable time frame that we could get at this point to get him in the academy. Moving on, building maintenance has been level funded on the bottom of page 8.
Are you able to spell that out, like the police and the DPW do, and for building maintenance, like how much they spend on each, how you come up with the 20,000?
So fire alarm and suppression and HVAC, for example, what we spend on each part?
Yeah, if you look at the other budgets, they all have it spelled out and how they tally up to that percentage or that amount.
It's possible that we could do it. I don't know that it would be accurate from year to year. Certainly, the last couple of years, we've spent a considerable amount more money on the boiler room, for example. Our pumps at 10 years, our circulator pump started to fail, and we spent $1,500 to $1,800 a piece on items like that. We spent money on making adjustments to the overall system electronically. And it seems at the moment that the boiler room's under control. So, you know, 1 year, again, we may have a number of heating issues, and in another year, we may have a problem with the roof. So there's not a lot of money there, considering the building is, you know, it's a $3.5 to $4 million building. But I mean, we can tell you, I certainly can provide you with what we spent in the past 3 years. If that may be more accurate. But to tell you that we're gonna spend $2,500 a year on HVAC, it's not gonna be accurate.
But the rest of the budgets do it, I don't,
Yeah.
maybe ask them how they get their numbers, so.
We can look
Yeah,
into
then,
it.
yeah, we can take care of that.
And I think in the past, we've had a few warrant articles that have come up for issues. I think we had a floor issue, and I think it was a security with the key cards. So I think sometimes, you know, these get addressed under warrant articles as well.
As I recall, we did that for quite a while, and then it was recommended a few years back that we eliminate those numbers and just total the number up at the bottom. And because of what I just mentioned, which was, you know, 1 year's HVAC, number's not gonna be what next year's is gonna be.
Eric, you'll take care of that?
It's on the list.
General expenses, we have proposed eliminating 3 different accounts that appeared in the budget last year. Office expense, copier and lease expense, municipal fire alarm expense, and radio repair and maintenance, that we would eliminate those accounts and merge them into our general expense line instead, to total $30,505. Those accounts have been level funded, but the general expense account would increase to $30,505 with the elimination of those other 4 accounts.
And I guess the same argument could be made on this, to see if you can itemize it out, get a better understanding of where it's all going. Okay. Yep.
Take care of that.
New equipment is level funded. Clothing allowance, we've proposed combining both the fire and EMS clothing allowance accounts, because we don't buy anything from an EMS perspective in clothing that doesn't say Upton Fire EMS on it. And same for fire, we don't buy anything that doesn't say EMS. So we've proposed combining those 2 accounts together. The career staff clothing allowances are calculated per the contract and per my contract as well. And the financial assistant also is provided with the same amount for uniforms and clothing on an annual basis. Totals $11,200. Those accounts are level funded. Forest fire expenses have been level funded. Fuel expense, again, this is an area where, from a combination standpoint, we're going to a car accident, vehicle accident, for example. Are we going to a fire call? Are we going to an EMS call? So we've proposed combining 5,000 from EMS fuel into the fuel line for fire to total 14,000. From a training perspective, same thing. We have training that crosses over between both fire and EMS. We proposed combining level funding, but combining those 2 accounts, fire and EMS, to total $18,500. From a utility standpoint, we're proposing level funding that account at $40,000. We talked about vehicle maintenance. It's combining $40,000, it's proposed, in the $4,000 from EMS. The ambulance service supplies line will no longer contain training, fuel, or vehicle maintenance, as we mentioned. It's otherwise level funded. Ambulance service licensing and certification has been level funded at $4,400. Paramedic expense is level funded at $5,000. Ambulance billing expense, which is the money that we spent, we paid to our vendor to do our billing service, is level funded at $11,000. From a revenue perspective, our permits and inspections, estimated revenue is still 8,000 as it was last year. Burning permit revenue, same at 4,500. We have, however, proposed a $15,000 increase in ambulance receipts from 245 to 260. And that's a conservative estimate, but we've from year to year, made very conservative changes to those estimates based on our experience as we continue to generate more revenue in the ambulance account. Any questions on revenue?
Nope.
That's the fire EMS budget.
Okay, gentlemen, any final questions? We have some things we'll work on. Derek, if you could get them to us, with, obviously, I know your timeline, whatever you can.
Two
And
quick
we'll-
things, sorry,
Oh, I'm
once
sorry.
again.
Yeah.
Just going back to ambulance service licensing and certification and paramedic expense, can you just kind of explain what that would be? Was that the actual, the ambulances themselves or the service? What does that fee actually take care of? Be on page 11, halfway
Yep.
down?
Paramedic expense?
Yeah, so ambulance service licensing and paramedic expense.
So licensing and certification has to do with our ambulance inspections themselves. 2 ambulances were inspected now, because we're at the ALS level, we're inspected annually. We used to be inspected every 2 years. So we increased that line a couple of years ago. That pays for our certifications and licensing for the ambulances, the trucks themselves.
Okay.
From the paramedic expense standpoint, that money is paid to out-of-town ambulances that we call to provide ALS intercepts, whether it's a second medic type call or a primary ALS service when our ALS service is otherwise unavailable on another call, or if there's not a paramedic level ambulance available in town. So that has become more and more infrequent as time has gone on, but we still, from time to time, call a department in to assist us with paramedic level EMS.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Yep,
Appreciate
you're
it. Okay, we're almost there. Thank you. Our next request is a request for a one-day liquor license. Traditionally, the Blackstone Valley Vocational Regional District has what's known as the Superintendent's District, Superintendent's Dinner, and they are requesting an all-alcoholic beverage license for that one day, alcoholic beverage license, and we have the application before us. Gentlemen, are there any questions relative to the application?
No, sir.
None? I accept the motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to authorize a one-day liquor license to Blackstone Valley Tech on March 26, 2018, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Second the motion.
That's unanimous action of the board. Next before us, we have a request. Brad, do you want to come up? Sure. The Men's Club traditionally, as we all know, sponsors the fireworks, which go back, it's been a number of years. It used to be the VFW for so long. And over the years, it's been known that they have made sacrifice against their budget to put this event on, and it certainly is not profitable if they have to incur the costs of some of the safety requirements. Some of the things are like the loudspeaker system for children that could get lost and so forth.
That's right.
I'll basically be quiet, but your request has
Yeah.
come before us for the amount.
I mean, over the past several years, there's been lost children. We go up on stage, try to make announcements to try and locate them. No one can hear us. One year we had a big storm come in, big thunderstorm. Fire chief had asked us to ask everyone to return to their vehicles until it passed. No one could hear us. So the sound system was really the genesis of this request last year, because it's quite expensive to get a professional sound system that can clear the field of all the people and so that to allow everyone to hear announcements during the busy time of the event. That was the genesis of it. With the funds that the town approved last year, we were able to get the sound system, and it by far made a world of difference. Everyone could hear us. Announcements were able to be heard, and so that was really a fantastic improvement to the event from a safety perspective. Other costs associated with that, obviously the tents are quite expensive, and those are needed to keep people out of the sun. and to protect against the weather. And then there's sort of the two-way radios that we use to communicate with one another in case of an emergency.
Do you have a date picked this year?
June 23rd.
June 23rd, I'm sorry if I missed it.
Yep.
Okay. Gentlemen, are there any questions?
Is this the same figure from last year, or is it a little bit higher?
It's the same figure from last year. No, it was sufficient to cover, I tried to tie it to specifically the safety-related items.
No questions?
No questions.
Okay, and for the record, for disclosure, I am not a member of the men's club. Somebody asked me last year how I could have the conflict of interest to appropriate.
None of us are.
None of us are, although it does look attractive at some time in the near future, maybe. Sorry.
We'd be happy to have you.
If we could make a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to give the Upton's Men Club $6,000 from the William Knowlton Fund for public safety-related expenses at the annual fireworks.
Second the motion.
That's unanimous, and thank you for all you guys do.
Thank you.
I know you're a representative of the men's club, but it's a lot of activity, and we're fortunate, and I won't get into all the other associations, but right down to planting of flowers to benefit our town. A lot of volunteerism, it's
We
great.
love our town, we love the people in the town, so
Yep, good.
that's why we do our best.
Takes a lot of manpower. That's for
Thank
sure.
you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, next we have a request from Mendon Upton Regional Teachers Association for a road race, and that road race application is before the board. The road race will take place on April 8th at 10 a.m., and we have the proper documentation submitted with all the approvals and reviews by the police and fire EMS. Are there any questions, gentlemen?
No, sir.
I have none.
Gary, a motion, please?
Motion to authorize the Mendon Upton Teacher Association permission for a road race on April 8th at 10 a.m.
Second the motion.
And that's unanimous action of the board. Next before us is the town clerk, and one of her collateral duties is the public auction of surplus material in the town of Upton. By state requirement, and I don't think I can refer to a mass general law, but by state requirement, the Board of Selectmen are required to review this list and declare the item surplus for auction, a formal declaration. So, gentlemen, we've had this 40-some-odd pages of documentation of equipment that range everywhere from vehicles to copiers to vacuum cleaners. So, are there any discussions?
No, I just figured it would be bigger, but it's a good start.
Yeah? Well, yeah, and you all did get copies of the vehicle that's on there?
Yes.
16,005, yeah.
I did see all this, yeah.
Okay,
I guess just a couple of quick questions. Obviously, there's a lot of different, looks like 25 or so different lot items. Did you plan on staggering them, putting them all out at the same time? How do you-
I hadn't gotten that far. At this point, we wanted to declare the surplus. They are all on one auction. I was thinking we could put it out there for 2 weeks and see 2 to 3 weeks. We did this a couple of years ago when we were moving out of the town hall. We had a lot of different things we put up for auction. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks that it was out there. We just let it
We've
go.
done it since too.
Yeah, you get a sense of what's happening. And of course, no one's gonna, there's some items on that list that no one will bid until the very end. Sorry.
Mhm.
That no one will bid until the very end to see what the final price is probably what it comes down to.
Right.
okay.
Yep. And then I
Okay.
suppose, and then as far as most of those items, some of the lesser priced items would be no reserve, and then obviously the vehicles, we would have a reserve on those.
Exactly, would have a minimum.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yep.
If we could have a motion to declare public service, surplus, items for surplus?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to authorize the town clerk to surplus all the items presented to us.
Second
That's
motion.
sufficient unanimous action of the board. Thank you. Okay, we have a request here from the planning board for favorable response from police, fire, historical, and code enforcement for the naming of streets in the Upton Ridge Senior Project, housing project. That sounds abstract, Senior Ridge Housing Project, but new development.
The new development.
Yes, this is a nicer way, I guess, saying. So we have Caden Court, Greenside Drive with Shannon Way, Fairway Drive with Jackson Drive, and Dogleg Drive with Sienna Circle. Those are the replaced ones. Again, I'll repeat, keep Caden Court as proposed, replace the Greenside Drive proposal with Shannon Way, replace Fairway Drive with Jackson Drive, and replace Dogleg Drive with Sienna Circle. Does the board see any reason or comment to this?
I was just curious why they changed if it's a,
We
Country
had
club area
a
that they-
member of the planning board was just here? No?
why they.
Okay,
why
I
they
thought I
did-
saw her.
I can address that.
Huh?
I can address that.
Please.
So, as you described, Chairman, the original proposals went to the Historic Commission, and as you can tell, most of these were reflective of a golf course. But when the public safety officials, in particular fire chief and police chief, had reviewed them, they were concerned in particular over Dogleg Drive and how it resembled similar other streets in town, and that if there was a 911 call, they wanted to ensure that their first responders didn't confuse Dogleg Drive with Dogwood, for example. So we asked the Historic Commission to go work with our public safety and public works officials to review the proposed names and then to approve those proposed names. The developer, Pulte Homes, they decided to change all the names other than Caden Court. So those were proposed by Pulte. They were reviewed by the Historic Commission. They were reviewed by both the fire and police chief and our DPW director.
Okay, it's pretty explanatory.
Yep.
I.e., we have Maple Road, Maple Ave, Maple Street.
Right, and those are the
Warren,
concerns. They've had
Warren,
lessons
yeah.
learned over time.
Okay, that makes sense. Gentlemen, any further conversation?
No, sir.
No? Motion to approve is submitted?
Motion to accept all names presented to us for the Upton Ridge Housing Project.
Second the motion.
That's unanimous action, thank you. Derek, I'll throw this one to you too as well. This is the proposal for the recreational signage under 780 CMR for signage up at Kiwanis Beach Road.
Great. So the, as you all know, there's a certain sign that created a little bit of controversy and concern up at the Kiwanis Beach, the upper parking lot area. The Recreation Commission, through their director, is proposing the sign that is before you, the language that is proposed on there. The intent is, upon approval of the Board of Selectmen, the rec director will then go ahead and have that sign reprinted, and would then be remounted by Recreation upon the completion of the new walkway and handrails. So again, we're gonna wait, we're hoping, I'm working with the DPW director, we're hoping to have that project completed mid-April to late April. So once it is complete, once we get the approval by our code enforcement staff, then we will go ahead, open the gates, and affix the sign.
So this is basically for our approval based upon the changes proposed.
That's correct.
Yep. Any further conversation, gentlemen?
No, we answered all my questions.
I actually had a conversation with Derek earlier today. We spoke about this, and I think the important thing was, to make sure all the repairs are done before the sign is actually hung. It was just something that was important to me anyways.
Sure, and we can, again, work with our building inspector. Once we get the green light from our building inspector, then we will go ahead and place the sign and have it operational for public use.
So, a motion, Gary.
Mr. May make a motion to allow the Rec Commission to install a signage for the Upper Beach parking lot.
Second the motion.
That's unanimous, thank you. Next before us, we have a request through the town manager for an appointment to Margaret Watson for appointment to the Council on Aging. The town manager submitted a letter of endorsement based upon citing her involvement and her competency for that position. Do we have any discussion, gentlemen?
No, sir.
No.
I'd accept the motion, please.
Motion to appoint Margaret Watson to the Council on Aging for a term expiring of May 2018.
Second the motion.
That's unanimous action, and thank you, Margaret, for coming forward. Okay, if we are going to pass over the designation of the 5 positions for special municipal employee, that's been corrected, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and next is the code enforcement permitting fee schedule. Under Chapter 143 of Mass General Law, fees are established through the town of Upton. They are the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen to endorse proposals brought forward by given departments. And we have before us fees, and it's quite comprehensive. It complies with the building valuation data without getting technical. This was all submitted to us, but we do have the fee grids and the explanations as to why they were submitted as such. So I turn it over to open debate. Gary?
No, they provided all the documentation. The only thing I was wondering if we should look at adding fee stuff to the financial policy.
Could I ask what that is?
It's the town's financial policy and
Oh, okay,
procedures, because I noticed that the RecCom actually spells out their fees in this. I didn't know if we should put all the town fees into this or not, so
Put the town fees into the policy itself.
how we go about doing this, so we don't run into the same thing that we had last time.
Certainly, I think the process makes sense to put into the policies and procedures manual, to Selectman Dougherty's point, to ensure that all the departments follow that process. They come before the Board of Selectmen to get approval before they institute new fees, if that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, that's
Certainly,
what-
we can
yeah.
certainly make that
And
happen.
it's a simple amendment, so that makes, you just amend the policy.
Yeah, because I noticed like, it does spell out that RecCom has to do it, so it's like,
Yep.
should be fair for everybody.
That's legit.
Right, I suppose unless it's Mass General Law, then it would be kind of redundant, but I'm not sure if it's Mass General Law.
The fee proposal, the only ones under Mass General Law that support propose the fees or endorse the fees to the Board of Selectmen. So basically, our endorsement would put it in that policies manual, which is also a policy that we not only endorse, but we set forward through that work that was done through CMRPC. So I don't have a problem going forward as is. I think they're reasonable and based upon contiguous towns. We're not outlandish or exorbitant. And if I do pay a compliment to one of the things that we pride in this town is that we have a personality and that this department tries to work with people and be cooperative versus restrictive. And I'll say it publicly, but if you dealt with some other towns like i.e. Cape Cod, it's a little difficult. So this town works in a different way. So gentlemen, is there any further debate to this?
No?
Okay, I'd accept the motion to, go ahead, I'll leave it up to you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept all proposed fees presented to us by the code enforcement.
Second the motion?
And that's unanimous as submitted to us on this documentation, correct? Okay, is there any new business before the board before we go in executive session? Derek?
If I could just make a few announcements this evening.
I'm sorry, I forgot the, whoops. What's your name again? I'm sorry.
Before I get into second.
My apologies.
So I had mentioned, I think late December, that we had received notice from the Division of Local Services that we received a grant award from the state. I just received final notice last Friday that we are a recipient of $30,000 grant through the Community Compact, agreement, $30,000 to develop an economic development plan here in town. So it's my hope that once we finalize the contract with the state, we will then engage CMRPC, who will support us. And my other hope is that we can convene our newly formed Economic Development Committee, because this is gonna be one of their first tasks, on top of a few other tasks, to help the town kind of reimagine the areas that we need to focus our energy on economic development, look at some of those priority development areas that were previously brought up, and look at some of the other proposals, like the Village Center Plan that was previously discussed in the past. So looking forward to that project this coming summer. Additionally, I had mentioned back in September, I believe it was, that we were engaged with a company called Kearsarge around net metering credits. And I had received the board's approval to go ahead and to negotiate an agreement with them and then execute a contract. They fell off the radar, so we were able to pick up negotiations with a new company called Nexamp. We just signed that agreement with Nexamp. I'd like to give full credit to Bill Taylor, who actually spearheaded that effort through the Green Communities Coalition. And by signing this agreement, we're gonna save approximately $40,000 annually on our energy bills. And lastly, I just wanted to remind everyone and bring you all up to date that the Snowflake LLC is the developer that is going to develop the 40B project, the affordable housing project at 149 Main Street. They've recently submitted their comprehensive permit application to the ZBA. That triggers a couple things. One, the ZBA has to distribute the application to all the boards and committees and within 7 days, and then hold a public hearing within 30 days. So in the next 30 days, the ZBA is going to hold their public hearing, invite boards, committees, and various departments to come to that, to meet with the developer and talk about things that they would like to see in this development as far as codes and other regulatory issues. So that is moving forward, probably looking at breaking ground sometime this fall or earlier.
Okay, just one. You want to talk about that Senate bill that people have been asking about? We talked about the other day.
Sure. So I know that there was an article in the Town Crier giving a lot of credit to Senator Moore for really spearheading an effort here in Upton and the other communities that he represents to submit dollars to the state as part of a bond bill. We had submitted close to $1 million worth of improvements, in particular $400,000 at Kiwanis Beach to make improvements around ADA accessibility. That bond bill has passed the Senate, and it's going to move on to the House in the near future. And so at some point this year, we will hopefully learn that we are a recipient, a part of that bond bill, that we can then use those dollars to make improvements. But again, once it gets legislature, it has to be funded by the governor. So although it's exciting news, we have a long way to go. And I know that a lot of folks have called, certainly the town manager's office. I spoke to Selectman Gary about it, and a lot of folks thinking that money's coming immediately. So we have a long way to go, but just so you know, we've submitted approximately about $1 million as part of the state bond bill.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a part of a $3 billion proposal altogether.
The governor, again, it's up to the governor,
It's
fine.
gonna come down to the governor in the end.
Anything else, Steve?
No, I have nothing.
Anything from the general audience? Okay, the only thing I will bring is there is an election, and we have a number of open positions, and if I believe it's March 27th is the final day.
They're due on the 27th, but they need to be taken out by the 23rd.
They need to be taken out by March 23rd for application to different positions for candidates, so just a reminder. Okay,
I thought of one thing while you're here.
sure.
Last year, a bunch of people in the community got together and did a town-wide cleanup. They're planning on doing another one. I believe it's April 21st. We were going to put some information up on the town website shortly once everything's finalized.
Okay, remind us every week and prompt that one. Besides, last year was very successful. I know you were part of it.
And Steve.
Yes, and Steve, I'm sorry.
He sent representatives.
Okay. The board is going to go in executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, Exception Number 3, to discuss strategy sessions with respect to collective bargaining. If the town chair declares an open meeting is detrimental to effect on the town's bargaining position. Again, the board will only reconvene for purposes of adjournment. Thank you. We're in executive